Modifications and accommodations are things that we have to do, especially with IEPs and 504 plans. Um, but also, they're just what can make students the most successful. So if we know a student is going to struggle on something, then maybe we modify it or we accommodate it so we're meeting them where they're at. That doesn't mean lowering expectations necessarily. That just means we're setting them up for success and then we're going to build on that. So they, like, if we want them to learn a skill that's like up here, here's a good way of looking at this. If we want them to learn a skill that's like up here, but they're coming to us down here, then we need to meet them there to build to that point. It's not necessarily that they're not going to get this skill or content or that they're not going to get the original expectation. It's just we need to do more building and more scaffolding to get them to that point. The same goes for ELL students. When they come to us, depending on their background, their culture, their levels, uh, we need to look at where we can meet them based off of their actual like test scores, their data, and what we know about them. So differentiated instruction in this area is huge, especially because some of us know, like we have some students this year that they just came to us. And so getting them to sit in, let's say, a social studies classroom or a science classroom and listen to us for 45 minutes um, when they cannot comprehend basic English, like they only understand like Spanish or their first language, then there's a disconnect there. So how can we still get them to where they start to understand the science content or the social studies content, but we're meeting them where they're at so they're actually understanding it? Because there's no way that we, like, if we don't speak Spanish naturally, that we can actually convey what we need to them and they're going to understand it. So it's not benefiting anybody. So we need to look into accommodations and modifications for that. But I also want to stress that this is for all students. I know that you guys know that we do have several students on an IEP, but we also have several students that are multiple grade levels below, and they aren't on IEPs. And so I have to accommodate for even some of my regular ed students, well, for the majority of my regular ed students, actually, based on our test scores, because we need to get them at the seventh grade level, or we need to get them to understand the content at seventh grade level, but they're coming to us from third or fourth grade level. So it's not necessarily like they won't get there or they're not getting that, but it's how do we build them up to that level. So again, this can be helpful for all students. Um, I also wanted to make a note about whole group versus hetero or homogeneous groupings. Um, Essentially, it does, like, you need to differentiate instruction for individual students, yes, but using some of our data points that we have has been super beneficial for me because I'm able to see trends that you can actually see, like in a whole group, like, oh, okay, like this whole class is struggling with vocabulary right now. So then that's something that I work on when formulating my curriculum and my instruction for that class. Sometimes you can see those smaller groups forming as well. So, okay, maybe this group of 4 or 5 is really struggling with reading informational text, so they get grouped together. Whereas another group could be struggling on vocabulary or whatever it might be. And so you can not necessarily, I think differentiated instruction seems like such a big thing to do sometimes. And for some kids, it definitely is. Like, for looking at kids like Kevin, you need to look at them individually. But also sometimes differentiated instruction could be based on a whole class or like even small groups. And so I don't want you guys to get super overwhelmed and think, okay, how do I do this with 100 and something kids? Because honestly, I don't think anybody has the time to do it for 100 and something kids. But looking at how to just be more purposeful about it would be the next step. So maybe what are the few kids that you really do need to do this with? Looking specifically at IEPs and 504 plans, but also like ELL students. Those would be the ones I would target first. And then look for the trends in the whole group or the small groups within a class. Another, like just a few other notes before I let you guys go to contemplate and to figure out how you're going to do this in your own classroom. But when differentiating instruction, it is important to think about a few things. So first one is assessing students. How are you assessing them and getting data on them to know what their strengths and weaknesses are? Um, and then 2 and 3 are strengths and weaknesses. So think about the whole student. Um, so what are they good at? Grow those strengths. Like use those as a base. Don't always focus on what they're not good at, because sometimes differentiating instruction does not mean that we're focusing on what they need help on, but it could be simply focusing on what they're really good at and taking them to the next level. In fact, there have been studies that have shown that differentiating differentiating instruction is actually very beneficial for those higher performing students, because we're not just focusing on the lower performing students, we are focusing on all students when we do it. So we give them a chance to enrich what they already know. So we're taking them that step further instead of having them have to come down and we all do the same thing, because they're already above that level. And so not just focusing on their weaknesses, but also their strengths as well. And then number 4, think about the culture and background that kids are coming from. Um, like in our district, we know the demographics of kids that we get, and we know what their families and home life are like, and some of the struggles that come with that. So take that into account when we're looking at what we're going to do with them in class. Like what would be most beneficial for them? Um, and then this also comes into play when we look at ELL students. Where are they coming from? Are there certain things that if we introduce, let's say, if we're looking at social studies and we're looking at Kansas history, and we're just talking about all of those events, all the places, all the people. Well, if they came to us from another country, there's a lot of stuff that to us is probably very natural that we automatically pick up on and know about because we're from here. So we've heard it a lot. But they might have no idea about the United States or about the history that came into the United States becoming a country. So that's something to think about as well. So here's what I would like you guys to ponder or like think about as we get done with this. But what do you already do in your classroom already? Because I know that you guys already do some of this stuff, and I'm sure some of you are sitting there and you're like, yeah, I definitely accommodate and modify already, and that's awesome. So I want you guys to really think about what you're doing well and what you're doing already in your classroom. Um, Also, if you guys really want to continue, kind of like if we're doing differentiation right here and you guys want to extend your learning, so you already got this and you want to take it a little bit further, you guys can do any of these activities. So create a 3-slide presentation of what you learned here today, a 1-page workup, you could write a poem, anything really. And if you guys do this, I would love it if you shared it with me. I think that would be so cool if you were able to do that. But this is also an example of differentiating where you're given multiple opportunities to show me what you learned today. And that's it. So if you guys have any questions, please do not hesitate to email me or to reach out. And I really hope that this training was beneficial to you guys. So I'm going to take off here, but like I said, if you guys have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. You can just use the email that I emailed out this and also the other resources with for you.